Hello, everyone. This is Transmutation Podcast. Our focus is to bring you inspirational speakers from all walks of life that have transmuted challenges into success. We all have obstacles to overcome, and our guests will give you insights that will provide the inner wisdom for your own transformation. Every one of us is capable of achieving greatness, but rarely unleash the passion necessary to propel us to the next level. Transmutation Podcast will take away the barriers to unlimited potential that exists within all of us. I'm Michael Jaco with Mo Bedard, your host, and our guest is Patrick Giguere. Patrick Giguere grew up in Southbridge, Massachusetts. As a second-generation American, he grew up enjoying the lakes, rivers, and forests of central Massachusetts. From an early age, he asked adults difficult questions, wanting to know the reasons why things are rather than accept face value explanations. Patrick had the opportunity to attend Pomfret School in Pomfret, Connecticut as a day student. Wanted to go in a totally different direction than his schoolmates, and having always been interested in military service, Patrick was admitted to the United States Naval Academy on his second try. In addition to the normal daily demands of the Academy, he rode on the varsity heavyweight crew. After graduation, Patrick was commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy and reported to Naval Intelligence Officer Basic Course at Naval Base Dam Neck, Virginia. After the 6-month course, hit the ground running and went on to the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Pacific Ocean just before Christmas 2004. So over the next few years, Patrick continued to receive instruction and training and supported military operations as a Naval Intelligence Officer. In 2009, he took his life in a totally different direction and was accepted as a Master of Science program at the Colorado School of Traditional Chinese Medicine in Denver, Colorado, where he studied acupuncture and Oriental medicine. Patrick graduated in 2012, and I can tell you, as I work with Patrick, he's a fantastic acupuncturist. It's some of the best acupuncture I've ever experienced in my life. Hello, Patrick.
How's it going? Good to see you.
Good to see you again. Tell us a little bit about your background when you were growing up.
Yeah. So it was interesting. You know, I was, so my town, Southbridge, it's about 15,000 people, and it was an industrial town till about, mid 1980s when things started going overseas and everything. But it was a really cool, town. Like there was a lot of different immigrant groups, mostly, from different places in, kind of the European world. And, probably till about the early 80s, they kind of had ethnic neighborhoods, so there was like, I have a French name. So my grandparents are from French Canada, from Quebec. There was like a French part of town, Italian, Polish, Romanian. So definitely I grew up with kind of a lot of that ethnic identity. My dad's parents, they were the ones from Canada, and they had a real, kind of a thick accent. And so they were really, they really wanted us to, kind of be Americans and, get good educations. And so it was definitely pushed from an early age. And, I had a lot of interesting people around me. It was just really cool to grow up where there were all these different languages, going on. And, there was different types of churches, there was Catholic churches and Orthodox, the different Eastern Orthodox ones. So I don't know, just from an early age, I was just always kind of aware that there were all these, these different types of people out there. So I was definitely blessed in that regard. And I don't know, I never felt like I had the typical kind of upbringing. I had a brother too, who, his diagnosis is like autism. So he was always kind of different growing up. So I never had a typical experience. And I always wondered why things were, and I went to Catholic school from like K to 8. I went to the school my parents went to. And,
wow.
I was just always, people would ask me, why, why do you have to ask so many damn questions? It's like by the time I got in school, hell wasn't a big thing like when my parents were in there, but it was still around, and some of the nuns were older, and there was a little bit of threat. If you're not good, good things aren't going to happen to you, and be like, wait, you keep telling us God loves us. Why is that going to happen? And and I'd ask questions like, I go camping with my dad a lot. We make a big fire, and I was like, if an angel fell in the campfire, would he get burned? And they'd be like, well, no, angels are spirits. They can't get burned by fire. And I was like, well, how's my soul gonna burn in hell?
Good one. Yeah, you are.
Just stuff like that, and my dad tells me to this day, he's like, when you were like 4 years old, you'd give me a headache with the questions you used to ask. So I was always curious about things, and I used to have really cool dreams. I mean, to this day I do, but especially when I was a boy, I'd have the craziest dreams, and I'd meet, really lucid dreams and some kind of interesting, like, spiritual experiences. So I just always felt like there was something beyond, what
I had a little bit of a Catholic upbringing when I was really young. My aunt, she ran a nursery, and she would send all of us down to the Catholic school, and we'd have we'd run around the church and stuff. It was fun. But I always thought, Jesus, it's not the way they're talking about him. There was something deeper. I felt there was something deeper, and I remember seeing angels when I was a little kid. Did you ever have any experiences like that?
Yeah, I did. I never saw, I used to see beings, and they used to talk to me and tell me things, and, tell me things about, like, later in life and everything. And they never had, they were luminous, but
Mm-hmm.
I think we see the same things in different ways. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And none of it's wrong. So for me, they never had the wings and all that stuff. So I never put the word angel to it, but it's like, yeah, angels are real. I've never, it's not something I've ever discounted, but it's not the word that came up for me. Like, I didn't know what they were.
Mm-hmm.
But,
yeah, I remember being sick and recovering from sickness when I was really, really small, and trying to get my mom to come in and see them. I saw them as angels, and they didn't have wings either. And then later on in life, where I had an experience where I saw Archangel Michael, then he didn't have wings either. So.
Yeah. I think throughout the years, people have seen these beings, and someone, the descriptions are all valid. So some people might say, oh, that's Archangel Michael, or that's Thor, or that's whoever, or Zeus, or what, you know what I mean? And it's like, you're all seeing the same thing. It's just descriptions. It's like martial arts, you know what I mean? The techniques are called different things, and you're gonna learn to do them in different ways, and different training methods are gonna get you there, but it's all right,
Excellent. So you had this questioning mind, and then you started books in other ways. So as you grew up, you went into, how'd you get to the Naval Academy? That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So, well, it's funny. So my high school, probably when I think I was in middle school, my high school lost accreditation. So that the town I grew up in, it's like one of the 3 worst school districts in Massachusetts. It's not a bad town, but I think they just don't put money into the school system. So my, especially my dad's parents, my dad's father, they're very into education. And that was, because he came to the US in like 1929, and he didn't speak any English, and they didn't have bilingual education. So he was like 13 or 14. He was done with school. And so I think that's something he wished that he'd had in his life. So, my whole family was like, well, you got to go somewhere else. So I applied to some private schools, and there was this place, Pomfret School, and it was like 15, 20 miles away across the border in Connecticut. And most of the kids lived there, and they were from all over the place, like mostly from, Manhattan, and, the wealthy, the affluent suburbs of Connecticut and Massachusetts, but, people from all over the world. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll apply there. And, they kind of get
a lot of Wall Street tycoons there in Connecticut.
Oh, big time. Back then, yeah, like in Greenwich and Fairfield and all that, yeah. So these kids knew you know, that they were going into like investment banking, you know. They're like, what are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to be an investment banker. You know, it was just like, it was taken for granted, you know. And that was a really, so I was a day student. So, you know, I just used to drive in every day because it was like, you know, 20 minutes away. But that was like an eye opener because, you know, my dad's father was a cabinet maker, and you know, my grandmother took care of the family, and she used to do all kinds of different things. You know, she used to make clothes and do, you know, all kinds of, you know, things she could do at home. You know, so they were really intelligent people. Like, speaking of investments, like she taught herself how to do that stuff, and I think she went as far as like 8th grade or something. So they were smart people, but they worked with their hands mostly. And then you know, my mom's dad was like a leather worker, you know, and, you know, like my mom's mom worked in the optical factory. So I went from, you know, just kind of being around small time people to going to this high school. And, you know, these 14-year-olds are like, yeah, I'm going to work on Wall Street. And they were going to, because their parents could get them the job and everything. So that was kind of mind blowing. And it was interesting because about a third of the school was from the area, and they drove in. You know, they didn't live there, but we used to win, like, we had a convocation every fall, which was like a, you know, academic awards ceremony. We used to win like 90% of the academic awards. So, you know, we were investments, you know, they helped us with the tuition and we helped them out, you know. But it was a good education. Like, you know, my French teacher was a native Frenchman. He was actually born in Vietnam, and he was interned during World War II when he was like 3 years old.
Wow.
By the Japanese. So he was like, that was like French immersion. I learned a lot from that. That was like college level. And then like history classes were awesome, and English classes were awesome. Those are the subjects I liked more. I was a total math dunce. So, you know, I definitely, you know, I went to high school with a really privileged, you know, group of people, and I don't begrudge them for it. You know, we're all born into these lives for a reason, but I don't want to follow that path. You know what I mean? I don't want to work in a law office or a bank or something. So, and you know, and they were raised different than me. Like I had jobs probably since I was like 11 years old or something, 12 years old. So total different mindsets. So after 4 years of that, I was like, man, and I'd always been interested in the military because my dad was a paratrooper. I was actually born in North Carolina. I was the only one in my family, not in my whole extended family, not born sort of right in the area I grew up in. So I always wondered if that made me a little different. But so anyway, I wanted to get out of the whole kind of the silver spoon environment, and I'd always been interested in the military. So I was like, I'm gonna apply to the Naval Academy. I hate standardized tests. I get bored, and I never really liked the way math was taught. You know, like as an adult, I would, you know, just kind of, I don't know, for some nerd fun, I would like look at Vedic math and how it's taught, like how they teach in India. Because a little factoid is that mostly all the mathematicians at NASA are from India, because they can do mental math a lot faster because they learn how to do it different ways. So they've got just like the giant room of mathematicians who are all from India, because they don't do it in a linear way like we do it. They do it in a more holistic way, and they can calculate some pretty complicated math mentally. So yeah, I mean, you know, as an adult, you know, I kind of pursued it, and I was like, why was I so bad at this? And it's not my most natural inclination, but I didn't like the way it was taught either. So the point of all this is I applied to the academy the first time. It's like my SATs were just bad, you know, and I had like B's and C's in math. So the academy was like, you know, this isn't going to do. But we have this program where you can go to high school for another year. You can go for a 5th year, work on your math, work on your physics, you know, take all these classes that things we need you to get through when you get here. And do your 5th year and do well, and, you know, we'll let you in. And I had a coach helping me out too. You know, I was on a rowing team in high school. So, you know, that it's good for a little something in admissions, you know, if a coach wants you. So I went to another school like that, but I lived there for my 5th year. It was called Kent School, and it's out on the border with New York and Connecticut. So kind of like north of like Greenwich and like, you know, all the affluent suburbs. Pretty cool school. I liked it better. It was actually more kind of egalitarian. They really didn't care what your background was. You know, they just expected you to meet the standards and conduct yourself well. So
you must have been like super motivated to go through another year of school. I know when I
God.
also graduated.
I wasn't happy at first, but I was a workaholic. Like my roommate was like, lighten up, man. And I was like, no, I got to do this or else, you know.
So you had discipline at an early age. That's really good. I didn't really get it until I went into the Navy and became a Navy SEAL. So I was kind of like all over.
You know, a lot of my discipline was, you know, I got to admit, it was kind of, there was a lot of fear behind it. Because my brother growing up was just like a nightmare. Like probably till he was like 5 years old, he would just not stop like screaming and crying. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's funny. It's like my early life kind of primed me for my later life. Like he was, I learned how to kind of melt into the background because he would just stress my parents out beyond belief. So I learned how to melt into the background. Mm-hmm. You know, I would say I learned how to ingratiate myself too, you know, with people above me who can make my life difficult if they so desire. So I learned that, you know, honestly too. I mean, I learned how to be a double agent because, you know, I learned how to kind of satisfy competing chains of command that seek to undermine each other. Because my parents were like that, you know. I mean, honestly, they weren't the greatest matchup, so that kind of that made things a little more interesting, you know. So, and I'm sure later in life people knew how to spot me, you know what I mean? But
yeah, tell us more about this, Patrick, how, you know, your brother affected you growing up, you know, you going to the background and having to kind of adapt, be a double agent, as you'd said, in your own house. How do you feel that affected you to kind of take this route? You had mentioned, you know, going on your own,
to
the private schooling kind of thing, and then the Naval Academy. You're kind of like choosing.
It was, well, sorry, Mo.
No, go ahead.
It was funny because I was, I don't know, like, you know, I was definitely a walking contradiction because I used to buck the system, but I still cared what people thought, what the family thought. Probably my, you know, I was close to my dad's parents especially, and I probably cared more what they thought more than my parents. But, you know, my parents too. So it's like, yeah, I could buck the system, but I still cared and I still wasn't quite doing what I wanted to do. So on the one hand, I kind of melted into the background, but then I sort of had to perform and I had to make my appearances and, you know, I mean, honestly, you know, it's like they had to feel good about something. So it's like that was sort of a role I filled, you know what I mean? Like the things I was doing were there to feel good about, you know. It's like, well, you know, things are messed up, but hey, he's going places, you know what I mean?
Do you feel you had a step in that role just to not stress your parents out and maybe take the higher road? And,
yeah,
you know, by doing that, you made things easier for everybody and then in turn a good life for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, it's like, I remember being in high school, it's like I just wanted to enlist and just sort of see where things went from there. Because, you know, I have a lot of respect for the people I went to the academy with, but there's a certain amount of attitude in there, you know what I mean? It's like with Michael, it's like, you know, you became a chief petty officer and like you didn't get that from an act of Congress, you know what I mean? Like you really had to earn that. And like, you know, as an enlisted guy, it's like they have to allow you to re-up, you know what I mean? Like you're always like fighting for your spot on the team, you know what I mean? And I really like that about that sector of the military. But yeah, my family, there was a big college push, you know what I mean? So that's sort of why I chose, you know, the academy. I think, you know, it's like, well, you got to go to college, you know what I mean? Like I think since the mid 50s, it's like that's been kind of one of the answers for everything is like, more college,
Mm-hmm.
So I was I was a product of my environment to a certain extent. I'm glad I did what I did, but there were factors outside of my own desires. You know what I mean? So it's like I was always doing things I wanted to do, but I found that they were always kind of like they were a little tainted with external pressure that I was allowing in. You know what I mean?
So you felt like your parents were driving you, or was it more that you had
Yeah.
an internal drive to like you wanted to achieve something greater and get away? It's kind of what I want.
Yeah. I wanted to achieve for myself, but
Mm-hmm.
I was never doing it totally for me. So it's like the way things got done were not entirely, my own design. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Would you have did things differently if they were by your design, do you think? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think I just kind of would have, I think I might have, I think it's a futile conversation because I think things are destined and, we do have free will, but we're operating within destiny. But I think, if I'd had the ability to be more genuine with myself, I probably would have enlisted and I probably would have like gotten to work quicker and, done some interesting things quicker. And, I might have gotten, I probably would have gone to college for something, I would have gotten interested in something and done that and maybe got commissioned. But I was definitely, operating from a place of pressure, earlier in my life. So
that pressure propelled you into the next stage, which was actually going to the Naval Academy.
Yeah, exactly. So I did my 5th year of high school. I did a victory lap in senior year, and in June of 2000, I went into the academy, and it was very interesting. It taught me a lot, and I'm really glad I did it. For me, I'm always learning. That's just one of my things. And, I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about myself and, and I met really interesting people from, just crazy jobs and walks of life. And, it was an awesome learning experience, and I learned about what kind of person I wanted to be and what kind I didn't. I had both to choose from. And the academy it's one of the greatest mind games you can imagine, because you have a million things you need to do that you can't possibly get done. You got to prioritize which ones you're going to do, which ones you're going to let slide, and whatever decisions you make, you're going to pay for them. So
yeah, when I was there as a senior enlisted, it was pretty impressive because I'd already seen the SEAL officers that came into the teams. It seemed to have a little bit of an edge. And then when I was a BUDS instructor, I just saw the Naval Academies as like I could definitely depend on these guys. We could hammer them and they could handle it, And then they led the class really well. And I was like, what? And almost like 100% of those guys would make it through, whereas the officers that were coming from other areas of throughout the military, they had pretty much the same washout rate as the rest of us, like 70%. So there was something that was happening at the academy. So I was kind of intrigued to see what it was. I had an injury, so I was like, to recover, I went to the Naval Academy, and I was like, okay, I'm going to see what these guys are like all made of. And at first, it was like, oh, they're just a bunch of college kids, But then as I looked a little deeper, I was like, there's more going on. There's a lot of leadership. You guys are like handpicked to get there to begin with. It's a tough to get in there. So you have congressional support, and you're like you're just talking about, your academics have to be superior.
Yeah, it's funny. I must have taken my SATs like 8 times, and I always said I got in the back door because every member of Congress can nominate 2 people every year. So you only got 2 senators in your state, and those are hard nominations to get. Like everything's got to be like perfect. But then every state's got a bunch of reps, so it's like I went through my local rep, and that took care of that.
Nice.
So, but yeah, so I would say I squeaked in the back door. But yeah, I think, I think in your book, Unleashing Intuition, you hit the nail on the head with the officers out of the academy when you said, the sleep deprivation was a big factor. Because, you just learn to deal with that. It's like there was no skipping class. Like that's a big part of it. Like no matter what kind of day you had, the day before, unless you go to, you go to the sick call, you go to the infirmary and you get them to excuse you. Like you got to be at those classes. Like there's no skipping the class and reading the material and, taking the exam. So, I mean, it's funny because like some people you talk to, they think the academy is like 4 years of boot camp. And I'm like, nah, it's, it's a lot like college, but there's more responsibility. Everything's mandatory. And it's just like, it's kind of annoying in a way. You know what I mean? Like it's the type of annoying that makes you tired. You know what I mean?
And that's just the outside pressures, right? You don't necessarily, that's not on paper. That's like the pressures of your peers and what's expected and what's been expected going down through the years in that academy. And that's what breeds that performance as well. And it pushes it out of you no matter what, right?
Yeah. Like you have in a given day, like, you plebe summer, like your first 3 months, it's like your basic training and you're up at like 4:35 in the morning and you're running around and doing calisthenics all day. But then academic year starts. And so academic year, you take more semester hours in a regular college. So, classes start at like 8:30 or something and going on till 3. So you have less free time than a regular college. And then, after school, you go to your sports practice, you do some exercise. And it's a pretty standard day, but if you start screwing up, like if you miss classes, you'll get some demerits. You get enough demerits, then you got to wake up at like 4:35 in the morning and have these things called tours. So you got to march around in this courtyard with your rifle on your shoulder for like an hour in the dark. And if you keep screwing up, you keep having to do these things. So it's basically like you get punished by getting your sleep and your time wasted. So yeah, if you don't go to all your classes and go to all these like meetings and things, then like you're going to be sleeping less, just having less free time. So yeah, just the mandatory things you have to do in a given day are more than regular college. And, it starts to wear on you. And, and there's definitely pressure, it's like one of the things they do is your freshman year, you take all these prerequisites. You take like chemistry, no matter what you're going to major in, you take chemistry and calculus. And, those are the toughest. And the teachers that they have teach those classes are like the ones who are like getting ready to retire. Like they've been professors for 40 years and, they're on the way. They're not the most enthusiastic professors usually. So they use those two classes as like a weeder, to get people. So they see who's going to hold up to it. So yeah, you're feeling a lot of, just by the way things are structured and just knowing that, they're not gonna give you kind of infinite chances, to get things right. You're definitely under pressure, but you get used to it. You knew you signed up for that anyway, So
did you actually want that pressure? Because I know
I did.
Yeah, you didn't?
Yeah, I mean, I was accustomed to being under pressure, and it's like, and I didn't want to live like my high school schoolmates. So,
it almost sounds like you needed it though, Patrick, like you were like kind of forcing yourself to get through it. And if you didn't have it, you might have went a wayward route or not finished, with it maybe.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because when I was in there, I was like, shit, I gotta be babysat. Because it's funny. When I went to the academy, I had less freedom than I did in the 5th grade. Starting around the 5th grade, I used to get up in the morning. Sometimes I'd iron clothes. I'd make myself breakfast. And in school's a mile away. I'd walk to school.
Interesting.
Wow.
So that's, if you think about that, you probably, that freedom you had growing up, and then your parents dealing with your older brother and, all that drama, kind of, you were free to do what you want. And then all of a sudden you put yourself in this highly, organized, militarized environment, which is the opposite of what you grew up in. So you were kind of going from, a relatively free life to a managed life where everything was managed for you. So.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. So that was kind of tough. And, definitely in the academy, I was, I used to say to myself, I was like, I should just go friggin' enlist. I was like, I can just work and just do cool stuff. You know what I mean? But I kept pushing through it. You know what I mean? Cause there's definitely a payoff to it. And you start sort of like, you start competing with the part of yourself that wants to quit. You know what I mean? And you're like, no, I'm not going to quit. Came this far. So yeah, I'm glad I did it,
Yeah, and it seems like you were competing against that free self, that younger self of Patrick, against the older self that was, living the adult life, in the naval intelligence and so forth. How long did you stay in the Navy?
Oh, it was I was all done by about 2009. Like that was like the end all, the involvement with that. So my graduation year from the academy was 2004. So that was like 5 years of that. And, some of the most interesting days of my life for sure.
So being an intelligence officer, you probably saw some pretty cool stuff and a little deeper than most of the officers in the Navy.
Yeah. Well, the thing is I got to deal with like a lot of, with a lot of like admirals and just higher up kind of people. And I got to go to really cool facilities and, just take really, there's a lot of like interesting tours of stuff, so I got to go to like, even like places where they test weapons, facilities, and just talk to like engineers and scientists. But especially, being close to higher up people, you start to learn a lot of the reasons why, because, people higher up are dealing with, big picture. So if you go to meetings with them and you give them a presentation, you're there for the rest of it a lot of the time. And you get to hear the higher ups talk among themselves, and and that's it's a blessing and a curse, because
I remember many times when I worked for the CIA, I would be in meetings, for protection detail, and I would hear stuff, and I'm like, I do not want to remember this. I do not want to remember this.
Yeah, it was funny. It was like, even at the academy, I did an internship in the summer, and I don't know if you guys remember back, leading up to the invasion of Iraq, but basically the Pentagon created its own like policy division, like a foreign policy division. So they kind of cut the State Department out of it, and that was a big source of contention. But within the policy division, there was this place called Office of Special Plans, and it came out later that they doctored up a lot of the intelligence, like a lot of the WMD's intelligence. But when I was in school, I did an internship with them, like during the summer one time, and they gave me a nice, at the end of it, they gave me a nice plaque. It was the deck of cards, because what they do is they made a deck of cards for all the Iraqi leadership. So the plaque, said Defense Intelligence Agency, and it had the deck of cards, and there was a little, I've got it somewhere, but there was a little bronze plaque with my name on it. It said Midshipman Patrick Giguere, and then it was special plans and quotes. And they gave it to me, and they had a farewell, and they were like, "Hey, probably shouldn't tell people you work here. It might not be good for your career." Because at that time, they were under a lot of fire legally, for things that had gone on. So, but yeah, so it was kind of funny.
Yeah, I was a little bit involved in that the WMD in Iraq, and we always thought that the stuff went over to Syria, and of course, Syrians have all the biological stuff right now. So it's like, yeah, it seems to be proven out that that our assumptions were right.
Yeah, well, I always wondered about the Husseins too, as far as Syria goes, because we know that during World War II there were like 3 Winston Churchills and like 5 Joseph Stalin. This is all on record, declassified. There were multiple FDRs.
Oh wow! Well, you got some good
I've
insight as just the 5 years in the intelligence community, so that's pretty impressive. So what was it? I mean, you've been driven to this point. Did you? Sounds like you were driven, but you didn't have passion for it. So what happened?
I was just, I reached a point where I was like, okay, what am I gonna do long term? And like I didn't have the passion, and I was just really hankering for that. And I was, I wanted to. I think earlier in my life I kind of had some sort of counterfeit passion. Like I didn't have a real feeling of it. You know what I mean? But because that was the thing I didn't grow up with. I mean, no one had passion. You know what I mean? It was like, people, they kind of pushed through things, and and they were like, well, I even like, I'd hear people say to younger kids, my age, it's like, well, it doesn't matter what you want to do. It's about what you got to do, So I wanted to have passion for the first time, it's like, my family was more passionate about what I was doing than I was. So I wanted to have that, and so I've always been interested in sort of the otherworldly and the woo-woo, you know what I mean? So when I was in the Navy, I had some acupuncture done, and I was really impressed with it. And I'd always been, I always had some involvement with martial arts and been really fascinated by them. And I was like, yeah, I'm passionate about that. And I was always talking to people about health. I was always talking to people, probably from the age of like 23, 24 on. I was always like, I'd see someone eating or drinking something, and I'd be like, have you read the label on that? Do you know what's in that? And they'd be like, what are you talking about? And I'd be like that's, I was like, there's bad stuff in that. And they're like, well, they sell it at the store. It can't be that bad. So I was always on people about this stuff. And I was like, oh, well, I'm passionate about health, and I'm passionate about spirituality, and, all this sort of like, more out of left field kind of stuff.
Did you ever get involved with like in any stuff that was like, out there? Like I got into some American Indian tradition stuff, and it took me way out there. It was pretty good.
I was looking at that, especially in Denver. Like they would have big powwows in Denver, and I was, I made some friends with people from that community. But because I have that, like any French Canadian has Native ancestors, because they mixed and married and mingled, up in that part of the world. So, but I really wanted it to do that for me, but it never really came across for me. So I was like, man, I was like, bummer. But then but one of the things that, some of the Native Americans, especially the elders, said, they were like, you can get into our tradition and, it'll work. But they said, what can happen, it's either if you don't have native blood, or for whatever reason, if it doesn't speak to you, what their advice was find the tradition of your ancestors. So if you're a majority, if most of your DNA comes from Europe, they were like, get into that tradition. And I was like, well, I don't know much about that. And they were like, it's out there. And it was almost like the Zen master was like, I'm not going to give you the answer, but you have to start looking for it.
So these were actually a tribe of elders that you had consulted, and you were interested in learning more from them. And they were like, hey, maybe not.
Yeah. Because I met a guy through Sweat Lodge, because there was a woman in my acupuncture program in Denver who was, she did a lot of Sweat Lodge, and her and her friends would like, they'd get these like shamans from Central America and South America to fly up to the States, and they'd learn things and do ceremonies. So she kind of like helped me, kind of connect me with some of those people and start learning about it. And, what they taught, it's all profound stuff, and I have the highest respect for it, but it just wasn't stirring me, you know what I mean? And it was frustrating, because I was like, I know this stuff's real. I know it's genuine, and like, I know there's a reason why these Native Americans were forced to give these traditions up, because they are powerful. And, I don't think I don't think the churches and the governments wanted the white settlers to learn that stuff, honestly.
Yeah, what's interesting to your story, Patrick, you know that I'm big on gnosis, and gnosis, you know, Plato had said all learning is remembering, and I believe, you know, in my research that really goes down to the core of our DNA, and you mentioned bloodlines and so forth, so that would kind of mix with that. I'm also my parents are from Quebec, from Canada as well, and yeah, I have Irene Bedard. She's a Cherokee Indian. She has my same last name, so we have Cherokee Indians, Native Americans, excuse me, in our bloodline as well. And then I've also, excuse me, I've got along really well throughout my life with various Native Americans as friends, and have friends to this day. But just a little bit different teachings that never resonated with me as well. So I kind of get what you're saying there, and you now kind of resonate towards the European type of teaching. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, you know, I'd always had kind of like a background fascination with like the Norse mythology. And I started reading about that more, and like, you know, the runes and everything. And I was like, wow, that really started striking a chord with me. And I don't know, one of the things, you know, they had a total connection with nature, you know, in Northern Europe. Like one of the things, they were totally harmonized with nature. Like when you're talking like Scandinavia, you know, Germany, you know, even like kind of the modern Netherlands, places like that. They lived in communities that were very much like what the Native Americans had. And when their populations would reach, when their villages, you know, their settlements would reach numbers where the land couldn't support their numbers, they'd move away. So that's when they started moving into like the British Isles and getting into the Mediterranean. Like a lot of kingdoms, like they're like the king's personal guards were made up of these Germanic people, like the Varangian Guard, like in the Byzantine Empire. It was Germanics who made their way down to the Mediterranean. They hired themselves out as you know, basically soldiers to the bodyguards to the Byzantine emperors, and that's how the Anglo-Saxons started getting into England too. So there was this whole tradition there that was harmonized with the environment, and they, you know, and it was animist. They believed that divinity was in everything. It was in the land and the animals and the trees, and, you know, even just inanimate objects. And the thing I really liked about it too was that there was no, you know, I was listening to a podcast. It was just you guys. Mo, you were interviewing Michael, and Michael, you talked to the audience about what the word sin really means. You know, and it's about, it comes back from the old days when people used to shoot bow and arrow, and it basically means you're off the mark. You know, it's not like a black and white, like you're getting the keys to the kingdom or you're getting damned. You know, it just means you're off the mark. So
yeah, right. A lot of traditional religions want to, like, you know, hook you and kind of do controls. And I've studied pretty much every religion out there. I get a little bit from everything. And the sin is kind of like a control factor. But like you said, basically all it is just you're not getting it, you know. So you're not hitting the target right where you're supposed to. So just keep practicing until you do.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing I got. That's the thing I got from this, you know, this European mythology, you know, in the gods. Like even the gods aren't perfect, you know, and they, you know, in the lore they admit to it, and you know, and they carry a lot of care about the mistakes they've made, but they evolve, and so, you know, it's funny when it comes to you know, evolution. It's like, you know, like Odin is when it comes to evolution, he's one of the biggest examples of it, because you know, they talk about how he was even a human being at one point, you know, and basically the way that whole, there's a whole process of human evolution in that tradition. So, and I'll give you an example, like in the Lord of the Rings, like the three races in Middle Earth were elves, men, and dwarves. So Tolkien took that right out of this kind of Norse, like Anglo-Saxon tradition. And so as humans, we were all once dwarves, and dwarves are basically like, they're like emotional beings. So, you know, emotions are living things. And so we have, you know, that's how you start out. It's like, that's what I think ghosts are. I think ghosts are basically people's dwarves, people's emotional bodies that after the soul leaves this world, these things get stuck in our world, and they're sort of like running a loop over and over. So in that tradition, that's how we start out. We start out as these kind of emotional beings that are of more limited intelligence, but they are very capable. And then we evolve into humans. And then after that, we evolve into elves. And the old word for elves meant the shining ones. So they were basically human beings who no longer needed to reincarnate. And they're, you know, they're on their way back to merging with the void or the God source, or whatever whatever you want to call it. And so they look back at us, and they mentor us, and they instruct us. So I lost my point a little bit, but yeah. So basically, yeah, in that tradition, you're just always. Oh no, it was about Odin. So they, even in the lore, they talk about how Odin started as a dwarf, and he was once a man, and then he transcended the human experience. So all through the lore of that tradition, you know, it's all about how you have to keep working at it and trying, you know. And a lot of it's misinterpreted, and people say, well, Norse mythology is all about, you know, being bloodthirsty and war and all this stuff. And it's like, well, no, it's probably, you know, probably to the, you know, maybe to the majority of people in that culture, maybe it was because they weren't tuned into the deeper meaning of it. But the thing is with mythologies, you have to know how to read it. You know, things aren't, our educational system right now, like the way we think was created in ancient Greece, because in the ancient world, you had, education was three-pronged. You had like symbol literacy and like metaphor and allegory, how to decode that stuff. You learn history and cycles, so history comes back around, and if you want to understand your present day, you study history. And then there was just education about practical everyday living, you know, so everyday living instructions. So the ancient Greeks kind of got the Western world off of that, and they put us into a very linear way of thinking. So time is linear. A always leads to B and always leads to C, and it never goes backwards. You know, so very little lateral thinking. And, you know, we learn things in a very literal and obvious way. So it's like the whole world we live in is at face value.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our education system, it's set up that way, but we also have that ability, and I think you have, and all of us here in this conversation, and a lot of people that are going to be listening to it, to not think that way, to always have said, hey, this isn't right. You know, when I was going through school, and you mentioned you were too, that, you know, things didn't seem right when you were in the Naval Academy and so forth. So I think, you know, we have this gnosis, this knowledge within us, knowing that. And I think once we get out of school, and even while we're in school, we do the different thinking and think outside of the box. And I think no matter what kind of system we're put into, whatever, you know, whether it's a Greek school system or whatever, we're always going to think outside of the box in a different way. And we're going to be attracted to those different types of thinking, you know. And I think that, you know, not everybody's that way, but kind of some people need to be trained just to kind of think that way to make it through life, you know, as far as the Greek system or the A through B or A through C. And then people, you know, choose just to kind of live that way. And some people choose not to. And I feel that the people that choose not to, you know, like you, Patrick, and exploring your gnosis, right after you get out of the Naval Academy, you're able to kind of discover yourself and, you know, this teachings and these learnings that you're attracted to, like you had mentioned, the, you know, the Norse mysteries and so forth. And I find it interesting that you're kind of blending the acupuncture, which, you know, is a totally different Eastern tradition, with the European. That's kind of cool, I think.
It's been wild. It's been taking on like a life of its own. Like I've even found, like a lot of people, when they work with runes, they'll just pull a rune for you. Like a lot of people have decks of rune cards, and it never goes beyond like, let's pull a rune card. You know, it's like they have those really cool decks of angel cards. Like I think, you know, everyone's seen those, and those are pretty awesome. And it's like, it's like when I went to Michael's Unleashing Intuition workshop. It's like he and his wife Tracy had a deck of them, and the ones I kept pulling, it was uncanny. You know what I mean? So those are really cool. But so people treat the runes in the same way, but you pull one card and it's like, well, what the heck does that mean? So the way a really good teacher taught me how to work with these things was to basically lay it out in a systematic format. So you use the 9 worlds. So it's like string theory talks about how like the universe is made of 9 dimensions. Well, in the old European world, they talked about the 9 worlds, the 9 branches of the world tree. So basically you lay these runes. I use cards, but you use whatever you want for runes, on wood, some people carve them on wood or in stone or whatever. But anyway, you lay them out like the 8 points of the compass. So you get your north, south, east, west, and then you got the directions in between. So you've got one cross, you got the one cross, the regular cross, and you got another cross that's turned 45 degrees. It's kind of like the British flag, like the St. Andrew's cross over the St. George's. So you lay the runes out in that sort of a format, and it's basically a map of the psyche. So it's the different worlds of the Norse world. So so the way they saw our world was that we were basically a convergence point. So the energy of these 8 worlds around us all converged. It was like a prism in reverse. So instead of the white light creating all the colors, it's like the colors are coming in and converging and creating this white visible light that we can see. So you lay these out for someone and you can see where the balance is, in the psyche, in within these forces. So it's like,
and it's interesting, Patrick, sorry, that science is now proving, it's proven for a long time that's true. We're made up of all these different forces, these chemical elements, which are energies and forces.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, it was neat because like, if you remember back to like chemistry in high school or middle school, you talk about Niels Bohr, who in 1912, he got the Nobel Prize for getting for coming up with the model of the atom, this revolutionary model of the atom. When he accepted that Nobel Prize, he used the yin and yang symbol, the Tai Chi symbol, as his coat of arms. And people are like, why didn't you use your family one? He goes, I would have been nowhere without reading Taoist philosophy.
Wow.
He goes, that's where I got the model. He goes, I just did the math.
So it's fascinating what you have done. All of us are kind of like the same. I took, my the information, the discipline that I got from the SEAL teams, and I transmuted it into, the intuitive side that I'm teaching now. And it seems like you've done the same thing. Mo, you should listen to Mo's back. His story is amazing. Really tough life, and he transmuted into like the gnosis work that he's doing now. Know thyself, pretty much. So with you, it's fascinating because you took all that discipline that you like kind of were pushed into, and on the other side, you've come into this realm. And it seems like that happens with a lot of people. They eventually get to that point where they transmute into something much greater than, this physical realm, the realm where we've been taught this is what we need to focus on. It's like, no, there's much more than that,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's funny too, because in my astrology chart, my ascendant, my first house, which is my personality, is Cancer. Cancer is all about your heart. It's about feeling good, and then so they call that the dragon's head, and that's what you're here. The dragon's head, your ascendant house, is what you're here to focus on in this life. And then my dragon's tail, which is my 7th house, that's what your 7th house, it's all the things it's your past life. It's what you've mastered in a past life. So for me, that's Capricorn. Capricorn it's duty. You know what I mean? It's like being stoic and just doing everything for someone else. You know what I mean? It's like, I still want to be a responsible person. I obey the laws and, respect people and everything. But, where I choose to spend my time now is more about, what my heart wants to do.
Yeah, and you gave me when you were here, you gave me some really amazing acupuncture. I've had people from all over the world do acupuncture on me, even Chinese, from China. And the acupuncture that you did on me took me literally into a different realm. I remember actually going to sleep and dreaming and everything while I'm under the needles. They're like, that had never happened to me before, and they were like intense dreams. It's like, wow. And then your Vedic astrology is pretty. I mean, it's some of the most accurate I've ever seen. So it's amazing. I think all three of us are pretty much have a lot of Scandinavian in us. So it's kind of amazing we get together on this little first podcast. So can you speak a little bit more about that?
Oh, what more about the
acupuncture and everything? I think what
you're doing now. What you already kind of led into it. Now is like it's on a different level. How did you get to that different level? Is the discipline that you had, you just transmuted it?
Yeah, I think. Well, you know what it was coming out of growing up, but then putting like the military on top of it. I had a good amount of PTSD and kind of the anxiety that comes with it. So I was like, I've been looking for ways to feel better myself. You know what I mean? It was funny because I went, 2009, I went right to acupuncture school and I pushed through that. And then by like early, 2013, it was like, boom. It was like how I'd been feeling for years, probably since I was a kid, just like caught up with me. Because all through those years, like I was kind of a Darth Vader, and I'm not talking like evil, ruthless Darth Vader, but like just not admitting to like the way I felt and not like just dealing with it and allowing it to be. You know what I mean? So just sort of like just pushing through it. You know what I mean? Like being ruthless with myself, really. So there was just we got through the whole 2012 shift, and I think for me, a big part of being able to, go into the quote unquote new world and stay on this planet was I had to deal with the way I felt. So that wasn't fun, but I was this journey, led me to ways to decompress more and deal with that. For me, it's like, I think one of the most spiritual things you can do is just feel your feelings. And I had to learn that lesson because I was avoiding it. So I found that I also believe too, at that point, like more energy was coming into me and that energy didn't want to coexist with baggage from the past. So it set up a lot of really uncomfortable feelings within my body, within my psyche.
Was it because you weren't being authentic with yourself? Yeah.
Yes, you've hit the nail on the head, Mo. I lead it right back to that. I was just because, you look into my astrology, I have like a natural chameleon ability, and that can be useful, but it can come at a cost to you. So. Yeah, I had to be more authentic with myself. So I think that really charged me, because after that, I noticed my treatments got stronger, and I was really getting into deeper information.
Because you were becoming Patrick, who you really were.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and it's funny too. It's like, people will, I feel better than I used to, and I attribute that to not blocking my own personality, not blocking my own energy. When I was like, I remember when, graduating from the academy and I'm like 23 years old, it's like I had more body pain back then. And granted, I don't push myself as hard as I did back then, but, I didn't feel as good. I used to drink on the weekend, Friday, Saturday night, I was going to have some beers in my hand, So, and I was an emotional vacation at the time that I felt I needed to take. Probably I was about 28 and I toned that down. But, so yeah, it was just about being more me.
So the drinking was like kind of a relation to you not being authentic, dealing with your stress, your mental vacation every weekend, get a little buzzed, drunk, kind of to numb yourself.
Yeah, totally.
And then of course that deals into bunch of yeast, brewer's yeast in your system, right? And parasites and fungi. So.
Oh God, yeah. If I'd only known.
Yeah, I remember that in the SEAL teams, it's pretty much if you're not drinking, you're not part of the team. So it was kind of it was tough to start to pull away from that. But I was the same way. But it was much later in my life. You're lucky to be at 28. I was like in my 40s when I started to like pull away from that. So yeah, a lot of drinking, and like Mo's saying, I mean, the health risk and detractions are amazing once you start to study them.
Yeah, it's crazy now. It's like if I walk into a liquor store now and you've got all those bottles on the shelves on the side of you, it's like I can feel it.
Wow.
I get the willies. You know, they call it spirits for a reason. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I talk about that too. Yeah, definitely.
I can walk down an aisle and I'm like, whoa.
Well, we're drinking a spirit. I mean, we're drinking the fungi, right? Whatever spirit that is, that life energy. It's like if you consume, mushrooms or something, you're actually consuming a live organism. We're actually consuming the excrement of the aspergillus or the brewer's yeast, and people don't realize that. And along with it, the fungi, which has a spirit of its own. And we know what types of spirits those usually lead to, and I believe it's the spirit of fire. So
yeah. And one of my teachers, he's the guy who got me started on astrology, taught me the runes, taught me some really cool qigong that I've been practicing and teaching. He's very versed in the whole Chinese medical system, and in Chinese medicine, your brain is considered, it's an extraordinary organ. It's kind of like a recorder. It's like a receiver. It doesn't really do your thinking and your emotional processes. The way that Chinese medicine looks at it is that your internal organs in your torso actually do all of your emotional processing and your thinking. So, and they're all responsible for different emotions. So the liver actually processes all of your anger and your frustration. When anger is not vented and expressed and it's not acted upon, it gets stored and it turns into resentment. And that's on a whole other level of potency. That's like compounded anger.
Yeah, it's interesting. And alcoholics, of course, their liver's affected. And what if they're suppressing it's usually right. They're suppressing some type of trauma or some type of issue.
Emotion.
They're not dealing with it, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And so alcohol preserves things. Like you can take a scientific sample, you could take a toad or something and preserve it in alcohol. So if you're putting alcohol in your system, I think like you're pickling your resentment.
Yeah. Interesting.
You get stored in your liver. You know what I mean? So it's almost like.
What's fascinating is all the different disciplines that you've learned. You're into the Chinese, the Vedic from, India, and also the runes up in Scandinavia. How did you mix your disciplines like that, and how do they interact? And
I've always been looking for the common, for the commonalities. Man, I wish I'd sent you some graphics. So, are you guys familiar with like the Bagua, like the Chinese octagon?
Mm-hmm.
So actually, if you think for the listeners, if you think of the octagon from the MMA, it's that shape. That's how the Chinese lay out the 9 worlds. But so the MMA, the Bagua, they got that from the Chinese martial art Bagua Zhang. And so Bagua, the martial art, it means the 8 trigrams, and the 8 trigrams stand for the 8 worlds that surround the one around us. So when the Taoists lay out this 9 world diagram, it's identical to the Northern European one, like completely identical. And all the directions mean the same things. And in India, all the directions mean the same exact things. In India has 5 elements, just like the Chinese do. And Europe had 5 elements as well. It's the Greeks that introduced the whole 4 element thing. Because the Greek 4 element thing, it's the material elements. They don't include the ether. The Chinese call it wood, but really it's ether. And so like in Wicca and things like that, when you see the 5-pointed star with the point up, that high point, you know, it's that spiritual link to the 4 physical elements. It's that ether. You know, if you turn that star upside down, it means a whole different thing. It basically means you're subjugating the spiritual with the material.
Well, it's interesting you say the ether, because, you know, I've related that to phosphorus, which, you know, in Latin is Lucifer, and the symbol for phosphorus is the pentagram, right? And then phosphorus is basically in everything, and it's what makes us conscious, and it's what's left of us when we die. So the only chemical element, my understanding, that's recycled is that phosphorus, and we can morph that when we're living, if we don't live right, and turn it to phosphoric acid. So,
yeah, and that's
interesting, right?
Too.
Yeah, we can blow up, right? Spontaneous combustion. You ever seen that, when people blow up? Like, so I researched that. That's some crazy stuff.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah. So you basically, people, they've found them. They're incinerated. They might find their head or just their legs, and it's called spontaneous combustion, and they relate it to their chemicals somehow firing. You know, and they don't know exactly why, but all these people are alcoholics, or they have a tremendous amount of stress or depression, and they end up dead and burned. And when I studied it, I relate it to the alchemy of these people. And they're, you know, when we think and when we live our lives wrong, you know, we can morph those chemicals in us to catch fire. So that's the hell you were looking for, bro. When you were a kid, right?
Yeah, seriously.
So
that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's why I found it's interesting, you know, because, you know, my tradition going back, you know, I relate mine back to the Phoenicians and the Greeks. That's kind of my heritage, even though I'm French. Mine goes back to then. I know the Greeks mastered government and democracy, so maybe that's why they only did the 4 elements, right? So
could be, yeah. That's an interesting thought. I think it's funny. I think the Greeks watered a lot of things down because they took the Vedic astrology tradition and they threw so many things out of it that make it really specific and really accurate.
I think that's the Greeks mastered it, where the higher learning was for the elites and the secret societies and the schools, right? And then the plebs, the lower levels, got a different type of education. And I think we've kind of continued that throughout the last couple thousand years, you know, in various ways. So, but we've always had these teachings behind it, you know, and that's what always gravitated me towards it. And I love the different, you know, how you're able to find the similarities in all these different cultures. They're literally the same teachings, just in different languages and different type of words, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's amazing. It's like, to me, it all points back to a global culture, because they all knew the same things. It's like how they're finding pyramids everywhere. They're even finding pyramids like under what they thought were hills in Europe now. You know, there's like
the Bosnian pyramids are much bigger than the pyramids in Egypt.
Yeah, I even saw one in France. I went over to like the Rhone Alps, like in the southeast of France, like 2 winters ago. And actually on Halloween, I camped in these ruins. And but there were these ruins. So my last name is Giguere, and my family's linked to this village in the southeast of France called Giguere. So it's spelled Gigors. So instead of Giguere, Gigors. And they had a different language. Like the French language didn't really reach the south of France till like 1700. Like it was called Provençal. It was a whole different, you know, it was a pretty different language. You know, it had a lot of kind of the old like Celtic kind of Gallic in it. But so yeah, there's this village with this, you know, I think it's the same name really. And then there was like the ruins of this fortress above it. And I was camping out there, and it was like Halloween 2016. And I'm looking over across the valley, and there's this hill that looks exactly, it's totally pyramidion. And I was like, yeah, I bet there's a damn pyramid under that, just like Yugoslavia. You know, it was probably the skyscraper of its day, you know?
Yeah, what you were talking about as far as the Greeks, during Plato's time, Socrates, and during that time frame, they basically decided to go away from the Oracle of Delphi and so forth, where they were bringing in that ether type of information that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know what happened to Socrates, right? So
yeah, undesirable.
Yeah, too much knowledge being distributed to the youth, so.
Yeah. Thinking on German thoughts.
So tell us, I was kind of interested in your story with Jaco, because I've never had acupuncture, but I've heard a lot of good stuff about it. I've had friends, Michael, of course, and then other people that I've been involved with. I've done hyperbaric oxygen. I worked at a place I was getting certified when my son was getting it, and they were big into acupuncture, the owners of the place there, and they swore by it. So I was always interested in about it. What do you do differently, would you say, with your kind of blend of European acupuncture, kind of Norse, that's different, or maybe what you did with Michael that's different? What kind of take us through what you did with him?
I don't want to get going on a huge tangent. Let me take you back to acupuncture school for one second.
Okay, all right.
So most acupuncture schools, they're teaching you, it's called TCM, it's called traditional Chinese medicine. It's not like the super authentic, like ancient Taoist stuff. What happened was, when the communists took China over, they were going to just throw out everything old, and they were going to implement like a Western medical system like we have, allopathic medicine, like a pill for every symptom. So what happened was, the medical practitioners were also the martial arts masters, and the communist government was deathly afraid of these people. So they either imprisoned them, they executed them, or they ran off into the hills, or they ran to Taiwan. So once all the power in China was consolidated, like every government that reaches a little too far, they realized they were out of money. And so they couldn't implement this Western medical system. So they were like, we need those acupuncturists and herbalists back. So basically what they did was they let a bunch of these masters out of prison, and they coaxed them out of the hills and gave them immunity for being practitioners of superstition. And they told them, we need you to bring back acupuncture and herbal medicine, but you need to write all of the mentions of spirituality out of it. Like, we just need kind of a materialist system here. Like, you can talk about the emotions and the psyche, but you can't get super into the spirituality. So they're like, okay, cool. So they redid that, and by like the early 60s, they had acupuncture and herbal medicine back as the mainstream. So I'm going, so I'm in acupuncture school, and I'm learning this, kind of, not super esoteric. It's esoteric, but it's not as esoteric as it gets. So I'm learning this stuff, and I'm 4 years old again, and I'm like, well, why? Why do we do it this way? And it was really cool because my school had like 100 students and like 45 instructors. So there were people there who were into all kinds of crazy stuff. So I started really getting into, the more spiritual side of it, these techniques that give you emotional releases. So I started going down that rabbit hole. And what I started finding, and I also, I'm a Reiki master too. I started getting into that because one of the things, like, the really interesting teachers in school were like, they sat us down in clinic one time, and he said, what makes you a good acupuncturist? And people are like, technique. And he's like, no, it's not technique. And he asked me, what is it? And I said, probably just being cleaner on the inside and being a better conduit for energy. I was like, you could probably put a beginner and a master, have them do the same techniques, and the master gets better results. You do the exact same acupuncture points with the exact same techniques, but different people will get varying degrees of effectiveness.
So cleaner, when you say cleaner on the inside, you mean just
less personal baggage blocking the energy. And, and what I think it is, it goes back to feeling your feelings. So less emotions, less of your own emotions blocking this energy that you're trying to get to come through you and, get to your patients. So the way I started thinking was, I need to get out of my own way. If I want to be this health practitioner, I just need to get out of my own way, and I just need to just let it happen. So one thing you really get into if you get like a Reiki attunement, if you go through that training and get your Reiki attunements, it's what I would call higher self. Well, I didn't come up with the term, but it's what we would call higher self medicine. So basically, the attitude you have is, I'm going to facilitate a healing with this person. But since I'm like a human consciousness on earth, I don't know everything. So whatever this person wants to do with this healing, they're going to do. Like, I'm not going to cure this person. I'm going to open the dam and let the energy in, and they're going to receive as much as they can, and they're going to heal as much as they're capable at this time. So it's like my higher self and the patient's higher self are like having a little conference, and they're sort of negotiating, okay, how effective is this healing going to be? Because I think if you take someone's sickness off of them that they're supposed to be learning from, I think there's karma involved with that. Because you hear, when you're going through acupuncture school, you hear stories about people who don't have the right emotional disposition, and they get burned out from their practice because they adopt this mentality of like, I'm gonna cure you, I'm gonna heal you. And so instead of just letting this infinite, like, intelligent energy do what it naturally does, they start basically thinking they know what's best, and you can start taking on people's ailments.
Well, they're taking on an emotional role in it instead of letting just everything flow. They're becoming personally involved in that person's path.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. Yeah, exactly. Like you can go learn medical qigong. In medical qigong, some of it is taught where you have this attitude of like, I'm just going to let it happen and let the energy flow. And some teachers will teach you like, you're the one healing this patient. And basically, when you put it, when you don't like trust the universe, basically, you don't trust, greater forces outside yourself, and you put all the weight on you, you're basically, you've cut off that flow from universal energy, and now it's up to you. So now you have to expend the energy in your own body rather than just conducting what's all around us that's inexhaustible.
Which is the limited energy in you, and that's where you become burnt out.
Yeah, and people can actually burn out their kidney energy, and there's very specific conditions they can get from this. So a lot of these people who practice that type of medical qigong, they have to spend like hours and hours a day in meditation to try to flush out the patient's sick energy and try to replenish their own. So it gets, it gets really, it can get really tricky. So I was like, I'm just going to get out of the way. So that's what I attribute my effectiveness to, getting out of my own way and to being.
What are some of the things you do to do that, to get into that mental mindset before you do one of these sessions? Can you tell us what you do?
Well, in the morning, I like to get up and I just sort of give thanks, and I ask for guidance, I ask the divine forces, in the universe to just give me guidance, just teach me how to know what's right, and help me how to know what's right, and help me to understand how to just stay within my role, and and just do this as well as I can. I ask for guidance, and then I have some qigong that I do that actually just very simple exercises, visualizations, and it gets your energy moving, and it cleans out your aura, and then I clean myself out and I charge myself up a little bit, and then when I go into the treatment room, I reinforce that idea that this is not up to me, but I'm just gonna facilitate, and I'm gonna open the floodgates, and whatever happens is gonna happen. So that that's what I remind myself of.
Yeah, I feel the same. Like when I took my intuition to a different level, I would come into like a city when I was in combat zones, and I would protect myself, and I would protect the teams that I was with and stuff like that. So always protected. But when I would leave, the attacks would start to happen again. So I started, okay, I need to take this to a different level. What is it that I need? And I got compassion, because when I did my first vision quest, compassion was the thing that came up in my vision quest very strongly. So it's been part of my life for quite a long time. So I got compassion. So same as you're talking about, I just asked that question, you know, I want to be of more service to humanity. And I got that connect with others of like mind. So I started imagining that as I'm sending out these thought energies of love and, you know, protection and stuff like that, that they would link with other people in these cities. So sure enough, when I would leave for months or sometimes years later, those cities were staying safe. So it's very, very important to be able to tap into these energies like you're talking to. Everyone can benefit from them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool, because a lot of people who, you know, they'll teach you meditation or qigong. They'll teach you to imagine linking with other people who do the same practices all over the world. So
yeah, and I mean, if you could relate what Michael's saying right now to these places that he's been to, that he's been able to transmute this energy to the populace there, you know, there's the opposite where bad things happen in certain places, and there always seems to be a bad energy involved with that place, you know. So you hear about those all the time, but never kind of the good stuff, right? But yeah, it makes sense, you know. But some people will think it's, you know, spiritual gobbly gunk, you know. But I think it's real, you know. And I've experienced it myself in different situations. You know, I've been to prison. You know, I've been into highly volatile situations that are different than, you know, some of you guys, but where just the mental mindset and you could feel something was going to happen, and literally it would happen. You know, and then when we were like all in this good mood, you would just be surprised, you know, 300 men, you know, criminals in a dorm room, and it's just like, it's just peace, you know. And then one person or two people, bad energies, could really set off that whole dorm room. And one of the big things that we did, you know, I was a shot caller for our group, but one of our jobs was to actually keep our people in check, those bad energies, right? So if someone was getting off check, he could throw off the whole room into a riot. So we had to take care of that bad energy, which would be dealing with it, you know, politically and nicely. And then if not, you know, force or violence was used on that person, which was the last resort, which seemed to always work in the end. But, you know, it just was kind of how we kept things in check in a violent environment. So
that's pretty wild. I mean, that has to be that's gonna be one of the most difficult environments to do that in.
yeah, it was, you know. And I mean, I look at, you know, different aspects of that in, you know, in society on the streets, and then also in the military, what, you know, some of you guys have to put up with. And then, you know, I'm also into martial arts now, and how that energy, you know, you have these two sides to us that we could either let the good divine flow, or we could kind of pent it up in us. And I feel that's that negative energy when we rely on ourselves, as opposed to just relying on that kind of the divine energy. You know, I like to call it the good spiritual energy. Great things can happen, and you could do so much more, as opposed to relying on yourself and kind of this pent up kind of energy. But yeah, you know, prison's it's an eye opener as far as the experience, but you know, a lot of people could change, you know, from those environments and go into other things as well. So
yeah, it seems like it could be like in a chemical laboratory.
Yeah. I've always been like you, just kind of like observing things, you know. And it was an experience for me. I needed it. You know, I actually wanted to join the military at one time when I was 17, and then found out that because of my record, I couldn't. And I kind of got defeated mentally because I had nowhere to go. And then I eventually ended up in jail, and I would be dead though if I didn't, you know. So I look at it as a way, you know, there's more people in prison here in, you know, the United States than anywhere else, but we also treat our prisoners a little bit better, and we have a choice, you know, to make once we get out of prison, to go back or not. And, you know, I made that choice to not go back and to make the better choices, you know. So I think there's good and bad that could come out of it, you know. And they have different levels of prisons. So, you know, if you're a violent criminal, you go to a top level prison, which I wasn't. So I was at a more low level prison, which violent things happen. But, you know, I feel our prison system, even though it's broken, it's one of the best in the world, and you can be reformed in it. So
yes, there's a lot of countries that wouldn't want to go to jail in.
Yeah.
So Patrick, on the Vedic astrology side, that was really good what you sent me. From your website. Can you tell us a little bit about your website and what you do?
Yeah. So yeah, well, let me start off kind of with the name of it. So this cosmic alchemist, like that can, when I first was entertaining the idea, I was like, well, does that sound kind of pompous? But I was like, no, it's not, because that name, that's not about me being the cosmic alchemist. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I am, but so is everyone. Because when you look at the word cosmos, I mean, Mo, correct me if I'm wrong, or Michael, if you know this better than I do. But, cosmos, it's Greek for system. So the universe, the universe as we think, like the planets and stars and whatnot, that's a system. Well, our bodies are a system and our psyches are a system. So it's like, it pertains to all cosmoses, all systems, microcosmic or macrocosmic, small or large. And then as an alchemist, it's like, well, that's what we're all doing, and we've all touched upon it through this conversation. We're all transmuting and refining, and that's what we're here on earth to do. You're not here to die who you were born as or who you were, at age 20. It's like you learn things, you learn lessons. And so I see it as a very all-inclusive sort of a name. It's like, well, we're all the alchemists. We're all the refiners and the transmuters of our own personal and internal systems, but then together we're all alchemists of our world and our universe. So so that's why I chose that name, because it meant those sorts of things to me. And in that logo, with those three interlacing triangles, that's called the Valknut. That's a Norse symbol, and it's one of the symbols for Odin. And it's those three triangles represent the three selves. So you've got soul, mind, and body. And it's about the interrelationship between those three. And, those were called, in the Norse tradition, they were called Odin, Vili, and Ve. So Odin is spiritual awareness. And so that's like, your pineal gland. And then Ve means sacred space. So that's your sacred space, in your heart chakra where your soul lives. And then Ve is kind of in the abdominal area, like, your lower self, like your willpower or your passion. So, I really wanted to incorporate into my logo the concept of these three selves that have to work together, and then in this Norse tradition, and then especially in the Taoist tradition, all the energy work, all the meditation and Qigong, it's all about aligning those three, because basically, it all comes out of the soul has desires. We're born here to live the soul's desires, in my opinion. That's the meaning of life to me. Find out what your soul desire is and just go for it and do it. Because a little sidebar, when they talked about dying and going to Valhalla, and they talked about dying in battle. It wasn't about dying in warfare. It's not just military guys that can go to Valhalla. It's about dying, going for it. It's about going for it. Whatever you want, go for it. So it's like when you die in battle, you went for it. Whatever you wanted from life, you went for it, and you weren't afraid to do that. You weren't afraid of, what other people were going to think. Because in the lore, it says, for those who die in battle, they go to Valhalla, and those who die in sickness go to the underworld. So it's not like you can't go to Valhalla, that state of being, if you're not in the military and you don't die in warfare. It's if you die in battle, you really went for it in life. You pursued your passion. If you died in sickness, it meant that you died afraid of going for your passion. And that like the whole idea of like Valhalla, or like the Irish, like the Tir na Nog, which is basically the same thing, the land of eternal youth. That was something that was always on my mind. I can remember being a teenager, and I was like, yeah, that's the kind of place I want to go when I leave here. So, I made changes in life because I felt like I wasn't pursuing that. I was living in sickness. So So yeah, so the three selves, when you align the three selves, the more you align them, the more you can just go for it. And you can, you know, you
Yeah, I
go.
love that, Patrick. That's great. And then how those symbols really mean something so simple and so simple, but so profound, you know, and I believe in that 100%, everything that you're saying now, as far as a personal reference, even though that you're talking about, you know, something else as far as mythology and so forth. I believe that that's real, you know, and I love the name Cosmic Alchemist. As above, so below, as within, so without. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this morning I rarely pick cards. I just not really something I'm into, but occasionally I'll do it. So for whatever reason, this morning I was like, I'll just pick a card. I chose the Alchemist, and until you just started talking about it, I didn't know why. So that's amazing.
Wow. Yeah, it was pretty crazy because when, you know, you invited me on this podcast and you said it's called Transmutation, and I was like, what an awesome name, you know, because it's on my mind. And then I was like, I haven't even told them that I chose this Cosmic Alchemist name. I'm like, what a great synchronicity. So yeah, that was really cool. So yeah, so for me with the Vedic astrology, it goes back to the one thing I can do when I get someone's acupuncture chart, I can see how the body systems are working, because the planets are macrocosms of that. They're just larger versions. So I can tailor make an acupuncture treatment. So that's really neat that I can do that. And one thing that I really that I don't try to stand out, I do stand out with. A lot of the time when you get astrology done, it's kind of a form of entertainment. You know what I mean? Because they'll ooh and ah you and they'll wow you with their accuracy, but it's like, okay, what the hell do I do with this? You know what I mean? Like, you came into it with questions about, you know, I want to do something different in my life and I want to make some changes, but it's like, well, now what do I do? So the way I teach this, you don't just get the Patrick show, because I don't really care if people are impressed with me. If they're impressed, I'm going to make more money, and that's great. But, you know, going back to, you said, how is your acupuncture so on point and so effective? It goes back to passion, because I want to help people know themselves better and live better lives. Because to me, when I look at the world, it's like the world has come a long way, and, like, you know, a lot of things are better than they were in the past. But on an internal level, it's like we're kind of living in a bit of a wasteland. You know what I mean? Like, we're very cut off from nature, from ourselves. We're forcing and I speak from experience, we're forcing ourselves to do things that are not really authentic. So I want to bring in that healing energy and help people do that. So with my astrology, I just don't want to entertain people and, like, become like a guru in people's eyes. I want to give people useful information that they can act on. So I give a reading, but then I basically tailor make a meditation for people. So based on, I won't get into the details, but based on your planets and which ones are strongest and which ones need work, I can teach people a meditation. I give them a mantra. And the mantra is in Sanskrit, but it's really simple. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I give you the pronunciation. And so you use this. And I teach people the Qigong too, because the Qigong, it's very simple, but it tunes your physiology into, you know, the cosmos, into the planets and the stars. The system is actually called Celestial Qigong. It's actually that I sent Michael a DVD once. But ideally what you do is you do the Qigong, and then you sit down for your meditation, and you do this mantra, and you use one of those mala beads. It's the 108 bead, you know, set of prayer beads. It's where the rosary comes from. You know, it originates in India. But what you do is you have 108 beads on this thing, and you count them as you say it. And it's because you have 108 chakras in your body, so you're charging up your aura. And this mantra it's a reprogramming language. And so what I'm teaching you to do is I'm teaching you how to reprogram your subconscious and your unconscious minds, because I have a high respect for the self-help world, but 99% of the self-help world addresses your conscious mind. Like you read a book, you know, you do a lot of thinking or a lot of reading, and that's very useful because if you want to start turning the ship of your life, you've got to get your conscious mind on board. You've got to take in ideas and information, but you need to, that's the first step, but you've got to go beyond the conscious mind, and you've got to change your, you know, you've got to change the subconscious and get deeper into the unconscious, because it's all of the feelings and the beliefs and the assumptions and the ideas that we don't know we're having. Those are the ones that shape our lives.
So what you're doing with these mantras, forgive me for interrupting, Patrick, is you're helping people clear these channels that are blocking, that they really even don't know, and then you give these to them, and that, you know, with these 108 beads, they're able to concentrate and focus on this mantra, reprogram their subconscious that's just broken, that they don't even know, and then slowly they break out of it and they begin to heal.
Exactly. Yeah. So for me, it's like there's this whole thing to it where it's like, yeah, you're communicating with the gods and spirits and whatever, and I'm like, don't worry about that right now. Just worry about just reprogram these sort of like self-sabotaging thoughts. Just like become more aware of them. And the more you do this, you start becoming aware of like where your self-sabotage is and where you're holding these assumptions that are holding you back from your goals. And once you do that, like if you have that intent in mind to kind of like do a house cleaning on your unconscious mind, and you have your goals in mind, you have this desire, this passion, the things just start happening. You don't have to figure it out. That's sort of one of the illusions we're living in. We're living in a world of the intellect, where like the intellect is a god. We need an intellect to live on Earth. Like it's like how you need a computer to go on the internet. I just can't stick, you know, coaxial cable in my head. Like I need this laptop that I'm using to talk to you right now. So we need this intellect to navigate the world and to solve problems, but it can't, if we let it drive our whole lives, we get into problems, and then we start getting really fearful, because all of a sudden you have the responsibility of figuring out every minute detail. And so people can start getting very cagey, they can get violent, they can get selfish, you know what I mean? And it's like, if you add power to that mentality, that can be a real disaster, you know, and there's not a lot of consequences for the things you do. So it's everywhere in our world right now. So yeah, basically the whole idea is like, you have your passions of what you want to do, and you have this intent to become more aware of your unconscious self-sabotage and, you know, false assumptions. And so you do this mantra. The whole mantra takes like 10 minutes with these beads. You know, your qigong, you know, you could spend as little as 15 minutes on that, but it's charging you with energy. And the more energy you bring into your body and into your aura, the more aligned you are with sort of the unconscious and subconscious parts of yourself. So the idea is when you feel when you become aware of your breath and your body's energy, you're getting in touch with deeper levels of yourself. You're going into the subconscious. You're going to go below that into the unconscious. And you'll start feeling emotions you weren't aware of. And when those feelings come out of nowhere during these practices, you know that you're tuned into a deeper level. And so once you're there, then you start these mantras. And the mantras are going to start turning the ship of life. They're going to start getting these false assumptions that you've adopted your whole life out of your system. And then you're going to get out of your own way, and you're going to be guided by your own intuition and by, you know, God, or, you know, what, you know, however you want to see that. But your higher consciousness is going to line up with your unconscious, and it's going to be a system that works a lot, you know, more smoothly.
Yeah, what I liked about your reading for me, it was like I could see that, you know, no matter what my religion, no matter what my beliefs, that I could get something out of that. It was such detail. I've had a lot of people give me astrology readings, and that was the most detailed and thorough. and insightful one that I've ever had. So thank you very much for that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I'm just, I want to spread this stuff so bad. You know what I mean? It's like, I think we're in critical times, in our history as humans on this planet. And it's like, I want this stuff out there. It's like, and I guess, yeah, how in the movies where like, you see it in comedies or you see it in like animated movies, there's like a villain, there's like a super nasty villain, but then someone's able to sort of like just one-to-one like talk to the villain and just get them on a personal level. And and they say something to the effect of, what did you want to do when you were a little boy or a little girl? And the villain's like, oh, and you see the wheels in their head turning and they're like, oh, I just wanted to.
Like they tug at the villain's heart, right? They somehow get it there, right?
Yeah, and the villain's like, I just wanted to, like, I don't know, have a model train storm, play with trains all day, you know what I mean? Or it's like, I just wanted to fly kites or fly airplanes, like, and like the villain like reverts to the inner child and stops being a villain because they're like aligned with themselves again. You know what I mean? So I think I use that example a lot because I think that's what we can all do. And a lot of the time, this whole idea with, just going for it and just, when I say like the meaning of life is just your soul desires and living them out, people who are like, people have a more dualistic mentality, who are like very dedicated, like, to Islam or to Christianity, Judaism, they can be like, well, if that's the meaning of life, then people are going to do all kinds of horrible things and it'll be pandemonium. And it's like, no. Nobody in this world really wants to kill people or steal things or hurt people. They do that out of fear. They get afraid and they're afraid and they have things that they're afraid of not having. They're afraid of not having money, or they're afraid of not having enough control, or they're afraid of not having enough recognition. So they get afraid of not having certain things, and then they go out and they do all kinds of crazy things. It's like, then you get like Hitlers and Maos and Stalins and, people like that. You know what I mean? So it's like, no one wants to act like that. They act like that because it's not only that they're afraid, but they're not admitting that they're afraid. Do you know what I mean? So that's why I say like the most spiritual thing you can do is to feel your feelings. And then if you can do that, you can really be honest with yourself about what it is that you want. So it's like, and that's a thing too, like with this Taoist tradition, with the Norse tradition, with the Vedic tradition, they don't start from a place of assuming that human beings are evil or that they're bad. There's no original sin. I don't believe in original sin. You know what I mean? I just believe in, you're either tuned in with energy, with the divine, or you're not. And when you're not, you're afraid, and then you do selfish things. But so these older traditions, these shamanistic traditions, the Taoists, the ancient Europeans, the whoever, the African traditions, the traditions of the Americas, they start from a place that human beings are fundamentally good, but then life gets in the way and you get away from your original nature. And they're all about coming back to your original nature, where you treat people fairly, and most of all, you treat yourself fairly. Because if you don't treat yourself fairly, you can't do that for anyone else. So
that's fantastic. So if you want to leave everybody with some inspirational type of thing, and also where people can get hold of you again. Can you leave that with us now?
Yeah, my astrology site. It's the cosmicalchemist.com. So that's my astrology site. You can get a sense of my mentality about all this stuff. You can book a reading with me. You can book a rune reading, an astrology reading. I'm going to get a Qigong video on there pretty soon. It's going to be inexpensive. It'll be like $10-15. And like once someone has had a reading with me, especially an astrology reading, I highly encourage, do the Qigong, do the mantra. Because the whole thing is like, you have to get more energy in yourself. New age, the lower self like gets the worst reputation ever. But in the beginning stages of Qigong, what you're doing is you're charging the lower self with energy, and that reinforces your boundaries, and it gives you the energy to act on the things you want to do. So, and once you do that, like the energy, it goes up to your heart, it goes to your pineal, you know, it opens you up completely. So yeah, so you'll be able to do all that. You can book a rune reading, an astrology reading, combined reading. You can book a consultation, but I'll have that Qigong up there pretty soon so people can do that physical practice. My other website is www.lifespringhealing. So lifespringhealing, all one word, .com. So yeah, those are my websites. And, you know, with the readings, you know, we spend an hour talking. I do your astrology notes, and I always encourage people to, you know, do an audio recording so you can come back to it and, you know, have our exchange, you know, recorded. Because not only you're getting me, but you're going to be able to hear your own questions again. Because when I do these readings, people answer a lot of their own questions, like you know, your innate wisdom just kind of comes out of you. So, yeah, so those are my websites. What was the other part of the question? I'm getting lost.
Just a few words that what you would leave people with. That's very inspirational. Transmutation.
Yeah,
like
I would just, you know, one thing I would leave people with is, you know, however you're, as a starting point, wherever you're feeling, just let yourself feel that way. Because if you do that, it's going to get out of your system. You're going to integrate it instead of kind of pushing it into the corner. It's going to become part of you, and you're going to get wiser from it. And you're going to realize, you know, what, you know, like what your soul wants you to do. Because I think for me, when I get angry, when I get anxious, when I'm afraid of something, it's like my soul has a desire. My real self wants me to do something, wants me to act on it. So, however you're feeling, just admit to it. Like face the fact of that and just allow it to happen. And that's the big starting point. And then from there, it's like you can do anything. You know what I mean? If you've found that, you know, over the course of years, you haven't been authentic with yourself, and you feel like you've been painted into a corner, there's always a way to do something else. You know what I mean? And it's like internal martial arts. You have to learn how to do more with less. So you have to give up. So you have to surrender to your real self to get where you want to go. You can't figure it out. If you figure it out, you're going to paint yourself deeper into that corner. Because, you know, I started life as a schemer, and I was raised by schemers. You know what I mean? And it was like, it wasn't getting me where I wanted to be. You know, it wasn't the me I wanted to be. But it's not easy, because we're all raised as schemers. You know, people tell you when you're a little kid, figure it out. But I would say, don't figure it out. You're going to have to take action. And usually the actions that are most uncomfortable and that scare you the most are the right ones. But you can do it. If I can do it, anyone can do it. You know what I mean? I don't think I'm anything that different and, you know, crazy. And, you know, we're all unique, but I'm not, you know, I'm nothing more than human, and no one is anything less than human. And, you know, I would just say too that, you know, doing this kind of stuff it'll benefit the world, because, you know, we're definitely at a junction point in history right now, and we can, you know, in the astrology right now, we're on the verge of a new world, and it's, you know, we can really embrace that and have an unbelievably amazing world, or we can take our lumps more. But to have the amazing world, we're going to have to, you know, we're going to have to take responsibility for ourselves. We're going to have to do things that scare us, and we're going to have to be more authentic than we ever have before. So we're going to have to go out on a limb, but, you know, anybody can do it. You know, you just one step at a time.
Yeah, and that's a great way, you know, to end it, because, you know, we all, I believe, have to do our own parts. And, you know, I like that we're all on different paths. Patrick, you, Michael, me, myself, and then everybody listening, you know, and we all got to do our parts and transmute that energy, and maybe get one of these astrology readings, or go to, one of these Unleashing Intuition courses and get back in tune with ourselves. And it's great talking with you today, Patrick and Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
I appreciate you both. Just one last thing. Definitely check out Unleashing Intuition. I did a video sort of review and a testimonial on that, and that meant a lot to me, being able to do that course. So definitely check that out, and check out Mo's work too. I've learned a lot from Mo's podcasts and the things that Mo's been writing and disseminating over the years. So definitely check both of these guys out. You'll definitely be the better for it.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah. So
take care, guys.
You too.